as in how could that pop out that is the Statsman Tagos, that is that does that not share. The Amaret's ability to properly advocate for it. So in other words, it's everything that he's standing. That Shad is and when I come up with Amar, you Ha'osvan, Shlik Ohu Kilometers. About the same thing, because at the end of the day, the way you realize that I'm not even one of the Mahalaya, I see it at both. Obviously, this guy Ma'aretz has some type of issue, or that's to say, the court officer has some type of issue with the Amaretz. That's some type of interpersonal conflict that's coming on the side that has nothing to do with the Torah. I see it that both, by definition, I've done my job as a judge to these people playing through. What's unfolding over here between Amaretz and the court officer, that's not my issue. But Amar Barakah. I show me about the Amaretz. You can say, you never had that. Listen to this. The Fatam Chacham and Amaretz ultimately can have it in Torah with one another. So what's that, Lacham? Lo Yiktom Survey Rabbanah B'Leishut, you should not say Kiman is suddenly Yiktom. So say, Fatam Chacham should not show up in these groups first, earlier to take his seat in the court. The idea is that it's not appropriate that the Survey Rabbanah should be seated earlier. Than Amaretz. Because once he's the first one to seated in the second one. It looks like again that's a perceived of sniper in the sleep. Although Amar eligible Kabila was that this is only true if he didn't have a Kabusa with the Daya. But if he had a Kabusa with the Daya, they had a Pius that the Daya normally earned. About Kila, it made less than us. We'll say he's actually interesting to come back and say it first. The Gemara seems to indicate over here that the fact that predicate as a Kabusa with the Daya does not disqualify the Daya from the case, which is quite fascinating. Again, we will revisit this in the next session. So the Gemara says, because again, if you have a Chavasa, the other way you can box in and see that. It doesn't share his hands because at the end of the day, you'll say that's just part of the Chavasa. But Amar Rabbi, I certainly Rabbanon. The yard of the Satsam is considered the Yosef of the Mitzvah of the last week coming. Since last week coming, low races, most situations. If you have a Talmud, he knows testimony. He knows that they have someone. There was a priest who tried in the basement with it by younger are not great as great stature of his Talmud. So call him Talmud Talmud knows testimony. But the thing is being introduced by Dayanim, please see and Talmud Talmud is much clearer Talmud Talmud. It's the God of God. It's clearer than we see. So it's a lack of cover to it than to come to this basement to testify in a case that is being adjudicated by people who are not as great as you. What's Halacha? What's Halacha will say? Halacha is Yisrael and Yisrael and Yisrael and Yisrael and Yisrael and Yisrael and low laser. It does not have to go. It does not have to be testimony in such a situation. But Amr Ashisha Breitashi, Afana Namitan, we also learn this. We also learn this concept that sometimes they will say, when the performance of a particular mitzvah represents the lack of comfort for the individual, under certain circumstances, one can be exempted from that particular mitzvah. Says the Gemara, Afana Namitan, Matza Sat over the stomach, right? When a person goes ahead and finds a sack of person finds literally again a bag or some type of receptacle, then he's not going to go. And again, it's not his direct ultimately again to go ahead and pick it up. As I will say, it's an object that someone would find, but it's an object that a person of greater stature would not normally bend down to pick up. What's that? Ultimately, again, he's not obligated to pick it up. So we'll say this is what we call something that you don't control. This is the idea ultimately that there are some things that are beneath my dignity to go and pick up. This is an eternal lost object. But Allah said, if that object is something that I would not normally pick up based on my station in life, I'm not obligated to mitzvah Shabbat Sabeito. So to the Gemara suggesting over here that if I know this, but again, the case is being indicated by a court that is quote unquote lesser than me, then I don't have an obligation to show up in that court to get testimony. Just 1 second. How do you use Mamona? So the case of monetary issues. So I understand in monetary issues, I might not be obligated to go ahead and what? I might not be obligated to go ahead and pick up an object and return it if you were to. However, about Surah, in Chachma, in Tibuna, in Yitzhak, and Nebuchadnezzar. Also, when it comes to matters of Isser, my covenant is not important. When it comes to matters of Isser, God calls the possible, there is no wisdom, there is no understanding, there is no counsel, the negative. When it comes to matters of Isser, we do that which is right without regard for one's perspective. So if I know testimony on behalf of someone else, it's very often entails Isser, so I have an obligation to give that testimony depending on my own covenant. Ultimately, don't worry about covenant. So, my definition again, the suggests, although there may be a concept ultimately that you have something in the middle of people, though, that it's not appropriate for me, I can overlook the object simply pass it by. When it comes to testimony, if I have a testimony, I have an obligation to give that testimony, even if the case ultimately again is being adjudicated in a basin which is at a less standing than I myself. But Yemar had testimony, unique testimony on behalf of Marzuch. Osla Kamidamema. Osvinu Lukudu. Amali Rashidamema. Vama Ula, Machotis of Ali. Avat Sosa States. So sorry, let me go back. Osla Kamidamema. So the king of Fani, let's remember again that Yemar knows Eidos for Marzuch. They come to the basin of Amemar, and what happens? Osvinu Lukudu. Amemar seated everyone. He allowed both of them to sit down. Remember again, so everybody's saying that Rashi said to Amimar, 1 second, Machlokias Babari did it. The Machlokias also are saying the same as everybody litigants. However, about the but ultimately again, everyone agrees that the Eidim give their testimony while standing. Amalei, so the Shaila of course is, why is it that at the end of the day you are seeing Rabbi, right? Rabbi was one of the witnesses. Why are you seeing him? Why are you seeing him? At the end of the day, witnesses stand. Amalei was doing this. Haya saying, the Haya saying. Listen, direct. There are two assays. What are the two assays? Right? Assay number one is Va'amdushmin Ha'anoshim, that the witnesses have to stand. Assay number two, on both sides, is Es Hashem Elokecha Tira. You shall feel, you shall revere HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Gemara Darshan Babakama, the rabbis Talmidei Chachamim. The rabbis say means that one should honor Talmidei Chachamim as well. The act of seating, Rabbi Mar was an act of honoring Talmidei Chachamim and assay to cover Torah on. So what's amazingly enough, Amemar made a call. He called an audible, right? What did he call an audible? He said, I have two assays in front of you. Assay number one is to go ahead, that the witnesses should stand. Assay number two is to give cover to Talmidei Chachamim. Therefore, again, I felt that the assay to give cover to Rabbi Mar, in this case, seating, trumps the assay ultimately again of having the Eidim and standing. All right, so stop over here for today. The rest of will continue with more of the details. We shall tell them the
Good morning. Today's daf is daf Tavchas 28, Masechet Shavuos. We begin by thanking our sponsors. We thank the annual Talmud Torah sponsor. We thank the Tilson family of Eretz Yisrael for sponsoring all the shiurim as a zechus for Yisrael's Torah for Am Yisrael. We also thank Dr. Steve and Terry Zinn for sponsoring all the shiurim of the month of Sivan in loving memory of his mother, Dora Zin, Dora Bas, Rabbi Yisrael, Yo, on her yahrzeit, the family should have an aliyah, and the family should have a nechama. Today's daf is daf Chochas Masechet Shavuos. You're going to be picking up on daf Zayin on the days at the two dots, somewhere around 12 to 15 lines from the bottom of the page. So just a quick reminder, we learned the Mishnah yesterday, where a person said, Shvu take the loaf of bread, and then he says again, Shvu shelo ochlena. There's a shvua that I will not eat it, and then he says again, Shvu shelo ochlena. So he says three different things. Number one, he's not going to eat this loaf of bread, and then he says he won't eat it, and he then says again, he won't eat it. So yesterday's Gemara analyzed why the first two. Lovely Levisti, the Gemara says, let's just pick up from there again, all the way from the Mishnah. Lovely Levisti, why do you have to say both? Why do you have to reiterate this shvur twice? Gemara says, this teaches us, time ad amar shlo ocha. The other amar shlo ochlana. The reason why he's only chayiv once is because he first said he's not going to eat it at all, and then he repeats shlo ochlana. In such a sequence, in such a way, he's only going to be chayiv once. Lo chayiv al chada. Amar shlo ochlana. He first said shlo ochlena. Amar shlo ochel, then he said he's not going to eat it at all. No chayiv tart. He's going to eat two. The more to explain because Amar to the Rabbi. From Rabbi shlo ochel kikar zu. The person says he's not going to eat this loaf of bread. So then that particular expression of I won't eat this loaf of bread. So then any part of that loaf of bread becomes forbidden, and therefore kivan sha'achal mimena kezayis chayiv, once he's eaten a kezayis in our bulk of that bread, halacha is he is chayiv. However, if a person says shlo ochlena, I won't eat this loaf of bread, heino chayiv ad she'ochel is kuli, has to eat the whole thing. In other words, the expression of shlo ochel kikar zu, but if a person says I will not eat this loaf of bread, that means he's not going to eat any part of this loaf of bread. Therefore, as soon as he eats a shear of the kazayas, he is chayiv, he has violated his shvua, and he has to bring a carbon. However, the person says shlo ochlena, that expression means he's not going to eat the whole thing, and eating the whole thing is where there's a problem. But if he does not eat the whole thing, then there's not going to be a problem. What's the difference? The difference is the order that he speaks. If he first says he's not going to eat this loaf of bread, which means he's not going to eat the whole thing, and he's not going to eat any of it. And then he reiterates he's not going to eat the whole thing, so that's an unnecessary redundancy, because once you can't eat any part of the loaf of bread, so then you don't need to have another expression to say you won't eat the whole thing. There's a problem just eating the kezayis. So therefore, in such an order, you would think that that's where he's only chayiv once, so the Mishnah goes ahead to tell us both. And that's how the Gemara says, in other words, if you switch the order, and first say he's not going to eat the whole thing, and then say he won't eat any of it, in such a case, he potentially could be chayiv twice. How will he be chayiv twice? If he eats a kezayis, then he violated his shvua of shlo ochel kikar zu, which is the second one. If he eats the whole thing, and he violated his shvua that he won't eat the whole thing, he'll be chayiv twice. That was the Gemara from yesterday. Now the Gemara goes on. Shvua shlo ochlena, person takes a shvua that he's not going to eat the whole thing, v'achla, and then he ate it, and he chayav ala achas. So now again, the Gemara still wants to know hasulamali. This is the third expression. In other words, you explain to me first the difference between shlo ochel kikar zu, that I won't eat this loaf of bread, and shlo ochlena, that I won't eat the whole thing. Fine. But then why does it have to say again shlo ochlena? The Gemara says hasulamali. Why do we have to have a third utterance over here? The Gemara says, "Hakamashma." This teaches me another halach, which is chiyuva hu deleka hashavua ika. A very important rule, says the Gemara. Our Mishnah is simply telling us how many obligations this person has if he violates the shvua. So if a person says, "I won't eat this loaf of bread," and then he says, "I won't eat it," So in such a case, even though he made 3 shavuos, he's only going to be chayiv 1 carbon if he violates it. However, our Gemara says that the Mishnah 3 Shavuos that took place over here. He did make 3 Shavuos. How many times will he have violated that if he eats it? Only once. The Gemara says, okay. And the Gemara says the Imashkatas Rabba Chayla. If you find a place that Shavuot can actually take effect, for it to devolve on something, then halacha is he will be chayiv again. And the Gemara says, okay, very nice. Lamai hilchasa. Where is this going to be relevant? In other words, very nice that he has 3 Shavuos. If he's only ever going to be chayiv 1 carbon, who cares if he has 3 Shavuos, 1 Shavuot, or 30 Shavuos? It makes no difference. I'll always only be chayiv 1 carbon. The Gemara says, look at the Rabbi. In the case of Rabbi, we'll be able to find a practical difference how many Shavuos there are. To Amarava, Sh'im Nish'al al Harishona, if he will reverse the first Shavuot. In other words, he goes to a Rav to go ahead and do, it's not a Taras Nadarim, but a Taras Shavuot. He goes ahead and takes away his first Shavuot. Then also Lo Shnia Tachta, the second will fall into its place. We've gone through this Mesechus Nadarim, just to get to bring this out. The way it works when a person has a second valid Shavuot on top of another valid Shavuot is that the first one kind of hovers. In other words, you have a Shavuot that takes effect, and it takes up the slot of Shavuot. If you make another one, the other Shavuot kind of hovers around and waits to find the place where it can settle itself. Now, if you never remove the first Shavuot, then the second one is going to continue hovering for eternity and never will take effect on something. However, once you remove the first Shavuot, then immediately the second one falls into its place. And that's the point the Gemara is making. The point the Gemara is making is, even though you could only have one effective Shavuot working at once, which means if I will have only violated 1 Shavuot, and I'll only have to bring 1 carbon. However, if by some mechanism I remove the first Shavuot, so then the second one immediately falls into its place, and the Shavuot is active again. That's the point that Gemara is making, that this person made 3 Shavuot. You remove 1, the second one falls in. You remove the second one, the third one falls in. And that's the relevance of all 3 of them working. Now, the Gemara wants it to take effect, but it can't take effect until the first one goes away. Let's try to bring a proof to this point. It says, Misha Nadar, Beis Nazirus. A person took upon himself 2 different periods of Nazirus. Nazirus is a person, it's a form of a Shavuot, where a person, or a Neder, a person takes upon himself certain Chiyuvim, if he accepts upon himself to be a Nazir. Let's just say it's Stam Nazirus is Shloshim Yom, so for 30 days he wants to be a Nazir. During that period of time, he cannot get a haircut, he can't have any grape products, and he can't become Tamei. Now, the halacha is, he personally says, person expressing that he would like to accept upon himself 2 periods of Nazirus. So now, he clearly can't do both at the same time. So it works. You have 1, and then immediately afterwards, you have the other one in succession. And will be consecutive afterwards. Those you have Nazirus period 1 and Nazirus period 2. Now what happens? Umana Rishona, he captured the first time, bringing the carbon and taking the haircut. So what does he do? The Hifra carbon. He separates the carbon, ready to go ahead and to offer his carbon to take the haircut. And he says, you know what? Forget it. I don't want to do it first. So he goes to a Rav and he said, listen, Rabbi so-and-so accepted upon himself 2 periods of Nazirus, but the first one was a mistake. I never should have accepted the first one, and he explains why it was a mistake. So the Nishal al Harishona, afterwards, he goes in and reverses the first one. Now, what does he have left? The second one. Now, what do you think? How would this work? There's 2 options. Option number 1 is that the first 30 days is completely ignored, and it's as if he wasn't a Nazir. Even though he practiced it, he's not a Nazir. And then, period of Nazir kicks in from day 31 till day 60. So the Gemara says, no, that's not how it works. The other option is, which is indeed how it works, you delete the Nazirus for the first 30 days, and also lo shniya barishona. The second one takes effect during the first period of time. So again, remember this guy, let's just call him Ruvain, steps upon himself 2 periods of Nazirus, and he counts the first 30 days, and then he changes his mind, he goes to a Rav, and he reverses his acceptance of the first Nazirus. Now the second one takes effect, and guess what? He's done. He has now finished the second period of Nazirus, because the first one went away. What happens to the Nazirus of the second one? It falls into place. This is exactly what we're saying over here, which is you have a Shavua. It can't take effect because something else is in the way. There's another Shavua there. You take away the first one, the second one falls into its place. Same thing as Nazirus. First accepts upon himself to be a Nazir, and he fulfills the first 30 days of Nazirus and then backs out because they didn't want that one. What happens? The second period of Nazirus nicely and neatly falls into the period of the first one, and also lo shniya barishona, the second one takes its place. The Gemara says hafiyafta. It has nothing to do with this case. In other words, these cases are not comparable. Why? Hasam Nazirus Miya Isa. In that case, at least the second Nazirus is there the whole time. The Himani Lorishona Boy Mahader Nimna Lashnia. You're going to always have to count the second one. Below She'ela, even if there's no reversal of the first Nazirus. How much more Shnia means the problem? Because these cases are it's not comparable. Why are they not comparable? Because when it comes to Nazirus, period 1 and period 2 are there the whole time. You can't do them at the same time because while you're doing one, you can't do 2. So therefore, typically you'd have to do day 1 through 30 and day 31 through 60. But both periods are there and waiting to take effect. That's not the same as a shvuah. A shvuah takes effect on a particular loaf of bread. Now, in most cases, you'll never be able to enact the second shvuah because once that loaf of bread is gone, so then the second neder or the second shvuah has nothing to develop itself upon, has nothing to be relevant upon. So therefore, it's incomparable. You can't compare the two cases. The Nazirus case has the ability for both periods to actually take effect, but the Shvuah does not have the ability for both Shvuahs to take effect. Therefore, it's either one or the other. It's mutually exclusive. Either you have Shvuah 1 or you have Shvuah 2. You could never have Shvuah 1 and Shvuah 2 because it's all relevant to only one loaf of bread. And therefore, if you have Shvuah 1, you want a Shvuah 2. If you have Shvuah 2, you want a Shvuah 1. Which is not like Nazirus, because Nazirus you could have Nazirus 1 and then afterwards Nazirus 2, which is very different than the Shvuah. Amarava, Nishpa ala Kikar, person takes the Shvuah not to eat a loaf of bread, and he ate it. So now he did what he shouldn't have done. What's the halacha? Rabbi says, Im shayr mimena kezayis, if he left over an olive-sized piece of bread, halacha is nishalel, can still reverse the shvuah, and retroactively it turns out he did not violate the shvuah. Achla kula, if he ate the whole thing, at that point in time, since he ate the whole thing, he can no longer go ahead and reverse the shvuah. Now the one wants to analyze this. Amar alei, Rav Ata brei Rabba Rav Ashi. Rav Ata, the son of Rabba, was analyzing this Rav Ashi, and he said, hey, Idami, how does this work? Ida Amar Shalo Okal, if his expression of this rule was that I won't eat this loaf of bread, as we explained in the Mishnah, that means he can't even eat a kazayas. So then the kazayas kama abe isura. Once he ate an olive-sized piece of bread, he's already in violation. So now how can you, what's the difference if you have a kazayas left or not? In other words, remember, we said, when a person says, Shavua shlo ochal kikar zu, the halacha is, he violates the Shavua as soon as he eats one kazayas. So now that's what happened. He ate a kazayas. So then why do you have to have a kazayas left at the end to be able to determine whether you can reverse it? He already violated the Shavua. It's done. It's over. It's already a problem. So then what do you mean? You can go ahead and reverse it. How can you reverse it after you've done it? It's too late. The deed was done. He violated his shvuah and he's out. So then, if the case was that no, he didn't violate anything yet. Why? Because in this case, he said shlo achlena, which means he won't eat the whole thing, if that's the case, that his prohibition is only to eat the whole thing, so might your kazayas. Why are you saying that if he ate a kazayas, it's going to be a problem? Afilu kol shehunami. Even, sorry, not that he ate kazayas. Why is Rava saying that if there's a kazayas left at the end, an olive-sized piece of bread at the end, then he can reverse the shvua because he's not yet violated it? You don't need there to be a kazayas at the end if you call shehunami. Even if there's just a crumb left at the end, he didn't eat the whole loaf of bread, so he's done a violation of it yet. In other words, as we'd say, mimanavsha. If the case is where he said he's not going to eat any of it, so then once he ate a kazayas, he's out. There's no turning back the clock at that point in time. He violated it. If the case was that he said he's not going to eat the whole thing, so as long as he doesn't eat the whole thing, he gets the reverse because he's not in violation yet. Why does it have to be that there's a whole kazayas left at the end, even if there's only a crumb left at the end, we should be able to reverse it? Gemara says there's two possibilities. The case can be talking about that he said he won't eat it at all. He said he won't eat the whole thing. Let's explain that. You can give a suggestion or about a case there. He said he won't eat it at all. And then, the point Rabbi was making was, you can't reverse the shvua if